Hi, I'm Joe Clark, the managing partner of the Financial Enhancement Group. We believe very clearly that everybody's on a financial journey. It is very easy to recognize where you are today. We want to help you recognize and understand where it is you really want to get in the future, and most importantly, what it takes to get there. Go to yourlifeafterwork.com or call us at 800-928-4001. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. It's 90 minutes, it's complimentary, and somebody on my team will walk you through things you need to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it into writing. Again, that's yourlifeafterwork.com or call us at 800-928-4001. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting today. Well, good morning and welcome back to your Retirement Playbook. I'm Joe Clark, your host. So happy to have you along. Hey, we are working on a case, and we're going to elevate this as we go. We're talking about challenges that people have inside of their financial planning. This segment, remember there are 4 parts. You may only be getting 1 or 2, so you can always go to our podcast wherever you subscribe for podcast. iTunes probably has the most on the Apple podcast system, but your Retirement Playbook. But you can also go to YouTube where we have 6 different channels that are there. The Tax Planning Show, Your Life After Work, the Legacy Planning Show, the Investment Playbook, the Better Giver Show, and the Life Planning Show. You can go there to get a bunch of smaller segments that are just on those areas if you want to watch a bunch. Your Retirement Playbook, obviously, is the full show. So what we're focusing on today, and in this segment, is actually inflation. What does it mean? What is all of the hullabaloo about? And how do you really want to think about it? So we're dealing with a couple today that is 55 years old. So let's talk about inflation. Does 55 years old and inflation come into play? Your answer should be yes, right? We don't know how long we are going to be on this side of the grass, as they like to say. We have no idea what our individual lifespan really is. But life expectancy and inflation are critical to understand. So when you talk about life expectancy, what does that mean? Does Joe have a life expectancy? Well, the medical world would tell you it's based on my waistline. It's based on heredity, some genetic stuff that's involved in it. It's based on what medical conditions that I have that are right now. I will tell you that I've got friends that appear to be very healthy that meet all of those metrics that just all of a sudden can give very bad health news. So it's not quite that simple. What you have to do, however, is understand the notion of life expectancy. Life expectancy is the average of a person born at a given age. It is not static throughout your life. They can tell me when I was born in 1966 that my life expectancy was X. But now that I'm 55 years old, my life expectancy is no longer that initial date. I've already moved past the car wrecks when I was in 16, the war years from 18 to 22. I moved through the first heart attack at 40, the first heart attack at 50. No, I didn't have heart attacks, thank you, Lord. But those are ages when those kind of things tend to happen to people. As you age, your life expectancy increases. Not for a whole year, but the period of time tends to go up. So my life expectancy at this point in time is getting somewhere around the 81, 82 era, if you want to look at everybody who was born in my age demographic. But who is that? It's a lot of people who, sadly, didn't take care of their health along the way, didn't necessarily go to dentists, didn't necessarily go to doctors, didn't have access to the healthcare system. We're out at 3 o'clock last night instead of getting 7 hours and 46 minutes of sleep. Aha, I do pay attention to that. Instead of doing that kind of stuff, they were doing other things that were going on. So when you look at your life expectancy, the probability is, if you're taking the time to listen to this show, that you are going to have a longer life expectancy than the average. That doesn't mean something bad isn't going to happen or challenging isn't going to happen, but longer than the average. So I always tell people to add 5 years. Go to Google, put in your age, ask what your life expectancy is now. It'll pull up the tables, add 5 years, and you'll get to about the 96th, 97th percentile. We do that for people every 3 years in the adjustment. Why does inflation matter over a life expectancy? Well, the longer you are alive, a couple things can happen. One, the more assets will probably go up in value as well as cost go up in pricing. Secondly, there's the longer you're alive, the greater the chance for outside of the norm hyperinflation like we saw during the 70s, like we may be experiencing right now in 2022, or very, very low inflation that we saw during the 2010 to 2021 era. You can have those different experiences. So the longer your life expectancy, the more open you are to a set of larger variables. It makes it a tougher equation, so you have to be a little bit more conservative. So being 55 years old and talking about inflation does matter. But really, what is inflation? First of all, a lot of the conversation right now is, are we in a recession or not in a recession? And here's the only reason I would care if we were in a recession, per se, and that is if money managers had to invest their portfolios based on being deemed recessionary or not recessionary. Recession is just a box. And ladies and gentlemen, people like to feel better when you can put a name around something, when you can contain it. It transfers a sense of confidence and understanding. It doesn't mean it's real, it doesn't mean it's legitimate, but people like to identify and they like to be able to contain. It's like this last time, so I can say it's like a square. Think about acronyms. They get people into the same problem. You have to try to figure out what in the world that is. Recession, we think we know what it is. Everybody says we're in a recession, therefore we are in a recession. No. The National Bureau of Economic Research is the only one who can deem whether we are or not. It's used primarily for academic purposes to say this occurred in this recession, this didn't occur in this one. We have very contradictory issues that are taking place right now. There's just no way around it. You've got a very, very low unemployment rate. You've got soaring prices, soaring wage growth. Are we in a recession or not in a recession? The GDP numbers came out. They tend to imply, based on historic norms, that we're probably in a recession. But we've never seen a recession with where we are in the employment part of the world, especially when you get into savings rates and other things that are going on. Very, very confusing, complex. Are we in a recession or not? I don't believe that it necessarily matters. What I care about is how the market interprets that data in terms of what they're going to do to my portfolio. Now, when I look at you, inflation does become critical. Do you want your assets to appreciate? Do you want the money in the bank, quote unquote, working for you? Or do you want it at a 0% rate? Well, I think you would naturally say, hey, I want it to go up. So we can think about inflation as a contest, if you will. If your asset is providing more value or has more demand than somebody else's, then you would expect for it to inflate in value higher than something else. In other words, inflation probably isn't and shouldn't be equal. If the value that something is providing is increasing faster than the value over here, and you've got a relative inflation rate of, let's say it's 3% across the board, everything's going up in 3%, but because there's less barbers or beauticians, or because there's less nurses, suddenly their price, their cost has gone up at a higher rate than perhaps somebody that's over here where there's plenty or an abundance of workers to do things in that particular level. That really is what inflation is. It is the basic of economics. The basic premise, by the way, is inflation occurs when you have too much money chasing too few goods or services. Well, I believe that it's not equal, that money supply chasing too few of goods, you can still have a broad-based rise, a broad-based appreciation. We don't have to get into the academics of why that is, but you can have a level, a floor of where everything went up by X percent, let's just call it 3. And then you have some things that went up a little bit less that had lower demand or an increased amount of supply. We can talk about computer chips and the ones that are in my phone greater than the ones that spent the Challenger into space in 1984, 85. There's some things that have declined in price that have gone up less than 3%, and there's things that have gone up more. To me, it's more service-based than it is goods-based. So I always look at people who are 55 years old when I talk about inflation, and I say, okay, what percentage of your budget, and yes, you do need to have a retirement budget when you get there, what percentage of your budget is based on services and what percentage is based on fixed needs? Now, I should say we also break that budget into two categories. What are fixed expenses, whether they're service or you're able to just pay somebody. There's something you're going to have your entire life, whether you're 65, 75, 95. And then there's social. That's the fun stuff in life. Well, some things that I do that are social are service-based. Some are fixed-based. The extreme majority are social-based. That means over a period of my lifetime, the amount of my resources required to go there will probably be closer to a flat line than an increase. So I'm able to run that through my budget to be able to see what it is that I am able to use. The part that's fixed, stuff that's in my social expenditures that I don't ever want to see go down, though they likely will, or not increase, that one I may need to increase with inflation. When I look at my fixed expenses, my utility bills, my property tax, my assessment just came out. I'm sure yours did. It went up. They want more taxes. The cable bill, eating, right? Those are fixed expenses. Regardless of my age, they're still going to be there. And that price needs to inflate with inflation. Again, the longer that I live, the more variable that needs to be, and I would encourage you to use a higher inflation rate than you think necessary than a shorter one. The older you are, the more you can back it down into recent experience or a longer-term average. By the way, when I got my CFP in 96, the average was 3.84%. When I told people that in 2015, they laughed because inflation was presumed to be almost zero. Today, I would laugh at 3.84 being the average because the current experience is much higher. Where we look at these 55-year-olds, though, in their case, when we get into the three grandkids, which we ran out of time, but the three grandkids where you start talking about future hopes, dreams, and desires, maybe we'll get into that in the legacy segment and how the money should be allocated. We'll talk about that in the volatility segment in terms of where we are. Remember, you can go to get all of these shows at YouTube. All you have to do is type in Your Retirement Playbook, subscribe to it, it'll come to you automatically, as well as our podcast, Your Retirement Playbook. You get the full show. Many of you are only getting parts of this show today. But the tax planning show, Your Life After Work, the legacy planning show, the investment playbook, the Better Giver show, the life planning show, it's where we break the show down into components. You can find them all there. Go to yourlifeafterwork.com for more.